doing the newspaper review now. We're going to look at the front pages of the papers, and they're stacking up like this morning, beginning with the Times.
Leading with Rosie Duffield calling on Sir Keir Starmer to end a rule that restricts child welfare payments to the first 2 children in most families.
Telegraph reports on Labour giving a bumper pay rise to teachers and nurses. That will be very welcome, but how will they pay for it?
The Observer leads with Labour's promise to make working-class children key to schools reform.
Mail on Sunday, MPs being given panic alarms after an unprecedented number of threats made towards them.
The Sunday Express says Labour has been accused of a great Brexit betrayal.
And joining us now to go through these and have their say on things, the editor of Spike. We say good morning to Tom Slater and political commentator Suzanne Evans. Very nice to see you both, guys.
Good morning.
So, Tom, we're going to start with this pay rise for nurses and teachers. So he's sort of giving out money without even having to get into a fight over this or waiting for a fight to loom. That's before he settled with the doctors, of course.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the recommendation from the independent pay review bodies for teachers as well as some NHS workers, which is often would allow a government to kind of hide behind that. It's not a political decision. This has been made independently. The problem is, of course, is that Labour went into the election saying we're not going to raise any taxes, we're going to stick within these very strict fiscal rules. All the while, all of the economists and think tanks are pointing out if you're going to do what you're currently claiming you need to do, then that's not going to happen. So, therefore, that's why he's in such a particularly tricky situation, which is to say it would be very easy under normal circumstances for him to just say the recommendation has been made, let's go with it. But he's going to have to find the money. And because this was something that Starmer was so slippery over, amongst many things he's quite slippery over, even aside from the politics of should they get the pay rise, should they not, what rate should it be, it just goes to that underlying point of him making promises that he can't keep.
You see, as a country, Suzanne, I would say we pay for a lot of rubbish that we don't need to pay for, right?
We do.
And I think finding this money is easier than people make out. We won't have the money if we keep all the spending levels the same in the same areas. But let's get in there and just cut all the rubbish, cut all the nonsense that we don't want. And I'll tell you what, if you were to list what government spends money on, the public would soon sort it out for them what they should be spending money on or not.
Yeah, I think they would. I mean, there's a heck of a lot of what's generally spent on wokery, I think is the kind of in phrase for it. There's a huge amount of waste in the public sector. I think any one of us, every time we perhaps look at schools, we look at hospitals, we look at the way public sectors are run, we think we could probably do a better job. But I agree with Tom. You know, where is this money going to come from unless Labour breaks its manifesto?
Well, do you know what I would say?
To raise taxes.
Never mind where the money's going to come from. If they don't find the money, where are the teachers going to come from?
Well, that's another good point, because how long does it take to train a teacher? You can't just train them up overnight.
But there's so many professions that are just not now popular as a result of the pay levels, like joining the armed forces, for instance, you know, and getting people to be dental assistants and all sorts of things.
Teaching, I think, is slightly different, because if you're becoming a teacher, you know, unless you really screw up, you've pretty much got a job for life. It's a very solid career. You've got security of tenure, really. You get a very good pension at the end of it as well, and the pay isn't certainly bad. You know, if you're a head teacher, you can be on £70,000-80,000 a year. The country can't afford this, though. This is my worry. And it's all very well starting by saying, well, we've got to give pay rises to teachers and nurses, because those are the people everyone loves. You know, people think, oh, yes, of course they deserve a pay rise. But this is just across the whole public sector. The country can't afford it. 99.5% of GDP is now government debt. We're paying £7.4 billion on government debt interest every month alone. This is unaffordable.
But also this on the backs of people who had nothing to do with the government running up debt levels to that point. You're looking at various teachers. Depending on how you calculate, you're still looking at their pay being eroded over the course of the past 10, 15 years by double digits. And, of course, there's always going to be an argument about how to pay for it, but still you can understand why people working within various parts of the public sector are smarting at the fact that they, because of inflation and because of how that's eroded their pay, they've been really struggling over the course of the past 15 years. So for then the kind of macroeconomic picture to be presented to them and said, well, we can't afford it, is always going to be a tricky sell, regardless of what...
No, I agree, and I think if you don't pay for teachers, you'll regret it. You know, I think that's a necessity. And I think if we all look at our lives, where you've come from, where you're going to, the importance that teachers played in your life, I think it's non-negotiable, but personally.
Yeah. It's so important, isn't it? And it is the future. We can all remember a wonderful teacher Do you remember?
Absolutely, yeah.
Of course, you've got to have good teachers. But, I've also been a school governor, and I've seen where there's waste as well. Yeah. And I've seen the ludicrous amount of time and effort that head teachers and teachers have to spend on useless creating policy, wading through red tape. Cut some of that, free up teachers to do what they do best, which is actually teach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, OK.
Okay,
Your view's very welcome.
Yeah, indeed. In fact, the growing criticism of Keir Starmer in the papers today, he didn't have long before he was bound to face this one in the Sunday Express, the great Brexit betrayal.
Yeah, he's not having a good start at all, is he? Let's face it, people are already using that phrase, Starmageddon, to say that things are going to be worse under Labour, and he certainly had a rough week of it so far. But this is the front page of the Sunday Express, a new law being drawn up by ministers, apparently, which could put UK manufacturers in lockstep with the EU on product safety rules. Now, this, of course, when we were in the EU, all the rules had to be the same. We had to abide by every new regulation that the EU put out. It also meant we couldn't sign independent trade deals with other countries. And now there's this fear is being eroded again that Sir Keir Starmer is trying to trade away our freedoms in a bid to cosy up to Europe. He doesn't, of course, have the best record on Brexit. And if this is true, then it certainly seems to me that this is at the very, very least against the spirit of the EU referendum, at worst a complete betrayal of it, as the Sunday Express says.
Happen, though, wasn't it, Tom?
It was, and I think anyone who took Keir Starmer at his word when he said a few months ago, Brexit is safe in my hands, probably needs their heads examining. But I don't think any Brexiteer took that seriously whatsoever, really. Even before...
Yeah, but there's Brexit and Brexit, isn't there?
There is, but I think we can all understand the general thrust of it, which was about sovereignty, which was about control. And if you're in a situation where your rules are basically being set by Brussels, you're just opting to follow them at all times. He's already been talking about a EU migrant returns deal, which is something which is so bitterly contested, even within the EU. The idea that we would willfully sign up to that is crazy. Even this kind of veterinary agreement, which is something that he's been talking about for a long time, sounds like quite niche and uncomplicated, would involve, at least if you listen to the EU side of things, subjecting ourselves to European Court of Justice rulings and so on. But again, this was always going to be the drift of things under a Keir Starmer, Mr. Second Referendum Labour Party government. It's just unfortunate that, as with so many issues, Keir Starmer says one thing and then does another, even when he's been quite blatant about it, I suppose.
It's not a good start just a week into his government, is he, that he's backtracking potentially on this, potentially on tax rises as well.
OK, here we are at the start of the school holidays. And Tom, there's £1 million in fines over the past 3 years, which have been dished out in the Bradford area. Children missing school due to unauthorised leave is more than twice the national average. What's your thoughts on this?
No, it's sky high, and even though some of these fines will sometimes be dished out for things other than holidays, it's something like 90% of them are actually for holidays specifically.
But this is just one city.
This is just in Bradford, yes.
Has made £1 million out of fines.
Yeah, over the course of the past 3 years. And also, when you're taking... This is one thing that the Sun story points out, is that particularly in this particular area where you do have a big problem post-pandemic with a lot of poorer and working-class kids not coming back to school, parents and pupils kind of losing the habit of constant school attendance. This sort of thing is not just about...
How the heck do you lose the habit of going to school? This is all sort of nonsense. People think they have a right. Oh, well, we have a right to 2 weeks abroad in Benidorm, so we do. No, you don't. You don't. I mean, I never went anywhere.
I think you do.
I never went abroad until 1980 or so.
But that's the olden days, darling, wasn't it? I mean, me too. I didn't go abroad.
Yes, but one of the reasons I didn't...
I want to now.
Well, my parents were able to say, no, that's school time, that's holiday time, and the two shan't mix. People see it as their right now to go on holiday.
It's great, and it's just I think the reason I've raised the pandemic in the midst of this is because of the fact that was another thing which almost presented school or almost as like an option. Like it was the sort of thing where it wasn't that important, it wasn't that sacrosanct. We were seeing this drift towards parents just, again, treating this almost as a human right to cut their children out of school and to go on holiday this year. But I think it has made things worse. It's undermined how important it's been.
Totally agree. When you look at what lockdowns did and the huge amount of knock-on effects that they're now known to be responsible for, I think you're right. Basically, the huge message that was sent with lockdown was schools aren't necessary. You parents are just as good as being able to teach your children as we are. I think that's absolute nonsense. Of course, that's not true. But that was the message that was actually sent. And now we're seeing the pain paying the price here. Our children are paying the price. The thing that I question, though, here is Bradford's one of the most deprived areas in the country.
Yeah.
How are parents affording these huge fines?